Thank you. Thank you so much, Christophe. And thank you all for joining us here this afternoon. Yes, I'm Dr. Will Tuttle. I'm the author of this book. You just heard about the World Peace Diet, which was a #1 Amazon bestseller a few years ago. And I'd like to just share with you some of the main ideas about the good news of healthy living. And so the main idea I want to share with you is that all of us as human beings have been given a wonderful gift. We've been given the gift of a physical body, right? You wouldn't be here if you didn't have one of those. And that does not require any animals to suffer in order to get all the nutrients that we need to thrive and celebrate our lives on this beautiful earth. How many of you by now have noticed that the earth is beautiful? Noticed that yet? Anybody? You can see it out here. The spring is coming. And so the good news is that, essentially, that we've all been given this gift. The thing is, like myself, I was born into a family where we ate lots of meat, dairy products, and eggs growing up. And it was very well-meaning and loving. My mother wanted to make sure that we had plenty of protein, plenty of calcium, and so forth. But I've realized that you pay a big price for that in terms of health, because animal foods concentrate toxins. Plant-based foods actually provide all of the amino acids that make all of the proteins that we need. They provide all of the lipids that make all of the essential fatty acids that we need to be healthy. They provide all the carbohydrates, which essentially are the energy that we run around on and we think with. Our brain runs on carbohydrate, on glucose. All the vitamins and minerals and so forth. So there's no reason to feed up plants to animals and then eat the animals. We can eat the plants directly without passing it through the animal. So we can kind of cut out the middle animal in a sense, right? And just eat the plants directly. When we do that, it's better for the whole world, because there's a lot of waste when we eat animal-based foods in terms of growing a lot of food and then feeding it to animals instead of eating it directly. So a lot of environmental problems can be solved by doing this, and a lot of health problems, and a lot of animal abuse as well, and other things. So I want to talk about some of those things for a little while here, and then just open it up for your questions. And we are very graced, I would say, with this instrument here, this piano. I'm not normally having somebody just bring a piano in, unless we're in China. We were in China, actually, a few years ago, 3 different times giving lectures all over China, and it was interesting because they always had a grand piano on the stage. They just love piano music. So I'm going to go ahead and just start out by playing a short piece of original piano music and invite you, as you're listening, to just enjoy the music for a few minutes. I'd like to dedicate it to the healing of all of our relations. I think we all know that on a deep level. All of us are connected with each other, right, and with all human beings. Whatever we can do to help make the world better for other human beings, it's a good thing. More peace, more harmony, more health, more sustainability, more freedom, more joy. But also not just human beings, all living beings. So we can include within the sphere of our kindness and concern all the other mammals living on this earth, all the birds, all the fish. Again, if they're happy and healthy, it's much more likely that we will be also. For driving them into extinction, there's a good chance that we will also find ourselves driven into extinction. So the whole idea is to see that we're all interconnected, and that the infinite love that is the source of all life loves all expressions of life, right? All expressions of life are love, and we can be loving. We can be loving to each other, we can be loving to this beautiful earth and to all the creatures here. So this is called Dance for the Arctic Moon. It's based especially on the idea of the sacred feminine dimension of life, which brings forth new life, to honor and respect that. And so I'd like to just dedicate this to the healing of all of our relations and enjoy this piece of original music. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so the underlying idea behind what I'd like to present today, briefly, is that we have our physical health, which is very important to us, right? And it should be important, because without physical health, it's very difficult to live a life of meaning and purpose if we just can't get out of bed and so forth. So being able to be physically healthy is something we should all be very interested in, not only for ourselves and our own happiness and health and freedom and ability to fulfill our dreams and ambitions and so forth, but for everyone around us, right? The healthier we are, the better it is for everyone. We're all blessed by healthy people. And if we're not healthy, it's difficult for people around us. They have to take care of us. It's more expensive. Healthcare is more expensive. And all the drugs we take end up in the water. I mean, so the healthier we are, the better it is for everyone, for the economy and for us and for everyone. So this is something we'll be mainly talking about, is our physical health, the health of our physical body. But I just want to say that our physical health is only one of 5 dimensions of health that are all totally interrelated. So the other 2 dimensions in the outer world are the environmental health and cultural health. And to be healthy, we need to have a healthy environment. It's very difficult to be healthy if the water is polluted, the soil is eroded, the air is polluted, the aquifers are all depleted, and so forth, right? We're going to be sick if there's a lot of chemicals, pollution everywhere. It ends up in us, we end up with cancer, heart disease, all these other problems. So environmental health is important. Cultural health is important. It's essential that we live in a healthy society, right? We don't want to live in a society where there's no freedom, no equality, and a lot of violence. So these are the outer dimensions of health. There's also inner dimensions of health, and if those are not present, they affect our physical health a lot too, and those 2 are psychological health, in other words, the health of our mind and emotions, and spiritual health, which is basically the most important of all, which is us as spiritual beings living a purpose. That here we are on this earth for a few decades. What are we doing with our life, right? Why are we here? What are we doing? What is our purpose for being? So these are all interconnected. That's why I have these white lines here. So the whole idea is to understand this point, and this is something that none of us are taught. It seems controversial to say it, but I just have to say it. What I've discovered through over 40 years of research into this is that we're born into a society that's organized at its living core around animal agriculture, around owning animals as property for food. Certain animals, cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, and so forth. We own these animals and eat them for food. It's called herding. And so the thing we have to understand is that it's unnecessary. We can get all the food, all the nutrients that we need to be healthy by just growing plants, having gardens and orchards and fields, and just eating the food directly. I've been doing this for 42 years. Since 1980, I stopped eating all animal foods, and here I am. I haven't died of a protein deficiency or a calcium deficiency or anything. In fact, I have not had health insurance or been to a doctor since 1972. All right, so I've stayed out of the whole healthcare system completely. I just don't have anything to do with it. Yeah, you can clap if you want, that's all right. But anyway, I'm very blessed. But the point is nothing to be proud of. The thing is to just realize that we've been given the gift of a physical body, and we're not taught properly how to be healthy, right? Most of us are taught as soon as we have any little symptom, like a sore throat or runny nose or a headache or whatever, we should run to the drugstore and get something to suppress the symptoms. And sickness in many ways is just the body's attempt to cleanse itself. So maybe we go through now and then having a sore throat or runny nose, but we're cleaning out toxins. And that's a good thing. Our bodies are miraculous in cleansing. If we suppress the symptoms all the time, it's going to be difficult for our body to cleanse. The other thing is to try to minimize the amount of toxins we're eating and drinking and breathing, right? That makes it harder for our body to cleanse all that stuff. So our health is connected to our psychology. A lot of people are sick because they're stressed out, or they're angry, or they're frustrated in their relationships, or so forth, or at work. I'm sure you're not stressed out here. This is such a wonderful place to work, so that couldn't be a problem. But other people, they might have that problem. And so just understand that our health is very complex, but food is a huge part of it. Because this body is a biochemical device, right? So whatever biochemical things we're eating, it's going to have a big impact. But our thoughts have a big impact. Our feelings have a big impact. The health of our society and of the environment have a big impact. And whether we're living our purpose has a big impact. If we're getting up every morning and we think, gosh, it's so great, I'm so happy to be alive, I'm living my purpose, every cell in our body is like, all right, let's go. Right? If I get up in the morning and I'm thinking, oh no, it's Monday, I have to go to work, every cell in our body is saying, oh, let's not do anything for this guy, he doesn't even want to live, right? So it's really, our body is always, we have a pharmacy, we have an internal pharmacy that's constantly creating different hormones and so forth, like a drugstore. And if we're positive thoughts and happy feelings and positive relations and healthy food and having a purpose all tend to create a positive, healthy internal environment. And this is something that each one of us can take responsibility for, right? I can't take responsibility for someone else's. I can do my best to be loving and kind, but each one of us really have responsibility for that. But the thing that I have to emphasize is that what I've discovered through my 40 years of research is that animal agriculture, which is the core of our society, it's the invisible core. We don't think of ourselves as living in a herding society. Like we're not out herding animals, most of us. But that's what we do. Madeline and I lived in an RV for 18 years, traveling all over the United States. And most of the United States has been basically converted into gigantic fields of genetically engineered corn and soy and alfalfa. And it's doused with Roundup, glyphosate, all kinds of toxic chemicals. And it's not to feed to humans. It's all to feed to imprison cows and pigs and chickens and other animals. And then we eat their flesh and their dairy products and their eggs. But all the runoff, all the pesticide, herbicide, fungicide residues, all the heavy metals, PCBs and dioxin, that all ends up concentrating in their flesh. All these animals are fed fish meal in order to give them, sort of boost their production, to boost profitability, so they give more milk, more eggs, get fatter. And fish actually concentrate a lot of toxins also because they're swimming in water, and all the toxins we create on land end up in the rivers and the streams and the ocean and concentrate in the fish, and then fish, if we eat them directly or they're fed to animals, all this concentrates as we go up the food chain. So we humans are eating at the very top of the food chain. It's not a good idea. All the toxins work their way up there, and then we end up with a cancer epidemic, and heart disease, and diabetes, and osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's, and dementia. These are all caused by toxic chemicals concentrating in our bodies. So the wise thing to do is to just understand this. We don't have to blame anyone or get angry with anyone. Just eat lower on the food chain, right? Eat lower on the food chain. There's a lot less pollution and toxin, carcinogenic chemicals. So the point is that animal agriculture erodes and harms all 5 of these dimensions of health. That's something we have to understand. It's just something that started 10,000 years ago. People started owning animals as property for food, and it's been passed through the generations. And it comes down, the only reason, like when we leave here, we see people eating meat, dairy products, and eggs. There's only one reason we do it. The same reason I did it for over 20 years. I was just following orders, right? I was just doing what my mother and my father and my teachers and my doctor and the minister at the church and all the ads on TV and all my friends and neighbors, they all said, yeah, you got to eat meat, dairy, and eggs to be healthy. So I did, you know. So that's why we do it. We're just following orders. But we can understand that it's actually not a very good idea, perhaps, to follow those orders, to perhaps move away from that and create something else, another way of living. People will say this. You hear people say it all the time. They'll say, oh, you know, diabetes just runs in the family. Oh, cancer just runs in the family. Heart disease, oh yeah, it just runs in the family. Well, you know what I said? It ran in the family till it ran into me. And that doesn't happen anymore, right? So we can change that. I think these diseases run in the family because everybody in the family has their legs under the same dinner table. That's why it runs in the family, right? And so we pass it on from generation to generation. So the idea is, again, not to criticize anybody. It's nobody's fault. It's just that we're all in some ways wounded with misinformation because we're born into a society that is organized around animal agriculture. And all of these are harmed. The environment is harmed because it's so inefficient. Our society is harmed because all the food that's feeding animals could feed people. See, the National Academy of Sciences, and virtually all the research supports this, that we could feed between 12 and 15 people who are eating a plant-based diet on the amount of land it takes to feed one person the standard Western diet. So that means we could radically reduce the amount of land that's being harvested with food and grains, much less land, much less pollution, much less petroleum, fossil fuels, much less water being sprayed everywhere and wasted. So we could allow habitat to come back, we could allow the rivers to heal, the oceans to heal, we could allow the whole earth to heal if we would move away from animal agriculture toward plant-based agriculture, which just takes much less land, much less petroleum and water and other resources. So we're moving in a way where we're reducing our environmental footprint. And that would also allow everyone to be fed. We're growing enough food every year to feed at least 15 billion people. We have about 7.8 billion people. So we have about 1 billion people going hungry, and they could eat the food that we're feeding to animals. And so people who study war and so forth, one of the main things we understand is that food shortages always lead to conflicts. Eventually, injustice leads to conflict, leads to violence, leads to war. So if we eat lower on the food chain, then there'll be enough for everyone to eat. And then we don't have to have hunger anymore. Hunger is really unnecessary if we grow food that everyone can eat instead of, like right now, huge amounts of grain are being grown in Africa, South America, and Asia, and they're just feeding animals while people out there are starving. So it's being exported to the United States, to Europe, and so forth. Also, just to mention the workers who have to do this work, Madeline and I have visited slaughterhouses, stockyards, factory farms, and the workers have very high rates of injuries. They have high rates of suicide and drug addiction, alcoholism, because they're doing jobs that no one wants to do, right? You'd be glad we don't have that kind of work, but I've seen these people. They have to stab animals all day or do these kinds of terrible things to animals all day so that I can take out my wallet and pay for that. So this is trauma that goes into our whole society. The workers cause violence when they go home. They're eating violence. The animals, of course, experience violence. We're eating it ourselves. So the whole idea is to just understand this, again, not to blame anyone, but just say this is what we're born into, and we can have an understanding of that, and then do the best we can to be loving, right? To just not cause, like the Bible says, try not to cause my brother to stumble, right? Not to do something that's going to make him or her do something that's going to bring out the worst in them. We want to bring out the best in other people, not the worst, right? So live in a way where there's enough food for everyone to eat, where other people don't have to do violent, abusive things. So that's all interconnected, and along with the psychological health and the spiritual health. And as I said earlier, there's a certain way to look at this. Well, I'll just go through this very briefly, but herderism, or herding animals, is the core of our society, which we're not taught. It took me 25 years to even figure that out, that our society is organized around herding animals. It goes back about 10,000 years, and there's a whole series of events that sort of happened because of this. I'll just go through this very quickly. In what is today Iraq, about 10,000 years ago, people started to own animals as property for food, right? That's called herding. That was the last revolution that our culture ever went through. It changed everything. So very gradually, over thousands of years, animals were reduced from being respected and honored and mysterious cohabitants of the earth with us to being property, just slave, right? We just own them. Animals were reduced, and it also led to, for the very first time, to a wealthy elite class, a class of people that was above everybody else, the kings, right? There was never any kings before animal agriculture, and they were wealthy and powerful because they had capital. There was never capital before. Capita is the old Latin word that means head, right? Head as a head of sheep and goats and cows. So this ownership of livestock was wealth, and it started capitalism, basically, and that led eventually to war. There had never been war. But once you own animals, and you have a lot of them, then there's a desire to get more animals, right? More wealth. So animals were wealth, So the oldest word for war on planet Earth is gavia, which means the desire for more cows. So a king would attack another king to get more wealth, more livestock, more capital, and it would be a bloody, huge, terrible war. Whoever lost the war, the animals would become the property of the victor, so they would get wealthy, but also it led to slavery, because whoever lost the war, the people would become the property of the victor. So now we had the beginning of slavery because, and this is something important to understand, whatever we do to animals, sooner or later we've done it to each other. So from owning animals, it's a small step to owning other human beings. And unfortunately, today we have a lot of slavery still. We have a lot of trafficking and a lot of slavery, probably more than ever in history. And then we have also the domination of women, basically because, animal agriculture is based on breeding animals, so reducing the female to merely a breeder. And so by the time the historic period emerged, about 3,000 years ago, I used to teach college courses in some of the ancient books, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Old Testament writings. You can see women are just bought and sold like cows and pigs and chickens and sheep and goats as chattel property. And then that led also to boys having to become hard and tough and capable of violence. That was the role model of boys to emulate, was a role model of hard, tough men who are capable of violence against women and animals and rival herders. So this whole led to a lot of violence and an unending history of war and domination of the weak by the strong. And that society spread from the eastern Mediterranean into the northern Mediterranean region, into Central Asia and into Europe. And then from Europe, it spread all over the world. And in some ways, it's still spreading through the fast food companies like McDonald's and Burger King, Kentucky Fried Chicken. When we travel to Africa to give lectures, we can see it happening. There's now Kentucky Fried Chicken, Burger King are big in Africa. And now there's a war against elephants, against giraffes, against lions, and against all the other animals that have been living in Africa, because now they have these big fields in Africa of genetically engineered corn and soy that they're feeding to imprisoned chickens and pigs and cows. That never happened before, so now all the animals are going into extinction in Africa. That's what's been happening. So it's been a war against nature, unfortunately. The beautiful thing is I'm not just here to criticize, right? We have a wonderful alternative that each one of us can learn about and we can actually adopt if we would like to. And it's called vegan living, based on ahimsa is an old word also from Sanskrit that just means non-violence. Another word for it is love, loving kindness, caring about others. And a local, organic, whole food, plant-based way of eating. That's what that LOW. So as much as possible, if we can move toward buying local, supporting local farmers at farmers markets, buying food that's not sprayed with herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, that's whole, right, without a lot of additives. The more we can eat foods that just come from the garden or from fields, whole grains, nuts, seeds, vegetables, fruits. This is really the foundation for a wonderful, healthy physical body, a healthy earth, a healthy society, healthy psychology, healthy spirituality. This is something we can just understand, and also understand that you're not going to hear about this. I was born into a newspaper family in Massachusetts back in the 1950s, early 1950s. And I remember I learned from my father, he wanted to be a doctor. And then he told me he was a medic in World War II, and all he did was give shots all day to soldiers. And he said, I didn't like it, I'm not going to be a doctor. And so he said, try to stay away from doctors. So I did, I followed that advice. So I kind of learned that, but just being in that milieu, growing up in the newspapers, I also have learned not to trust the media. Because what I learned is, you cannot have anything in a newspaper or on television or radio or anywhere that goes against the advertisers, right? The advertisers will pull, my father would say that to my mother, well, we can't run this news story because so-and-so advertiser wouldn't like it. So you're never going to hear it. You're not going to hear what I'm saying on the media. Who are the biggest advertisers? Right? The fast food industry, and the food industry in general, and the pharmaceutical industry, and the petroleum industry, and the banks supporting them. So all of these different industries would much rather, they make all their money on sick people. They haven't made any money on me in 50 years, right? So that's their worst nightmare, that we actually are healthy and happy and getting along. They make money really on sick people and war and so forth. So peace and health and sustainability really are a way for us, the people, to take back really our sovereignty, to connect with the beauty of this earth and to create healthy communities that are not just be subject to a centralized dictators far away, but to take back our power. See, the thing we have to understand is if we're going to insist on exploiting other living beings, what's going to happen to us? We'll get exploited. Remember that, Paul said it very clearly. He said, God is not mocked. Whatever you sow, so shall you also reap. So if we're going to insist on sowing seeds of violence and hurting others, it does come back, and disease and so forth. So this is the good news, is that it's not necessary. There's this animal agriculture, the cow in the room, and these different things. Diabetes rates have doubled, dead zones in the ocean, rainforest disappearing, the next pandemic. Why is our society so violent? Global warming is unstoppable. My doctor says I need an angioplasty. 800 million people are starving. California is running out of water. One single industry causes a lot of harm, really, a tremendous amount of harm. We can just learn about this and do the best we can that's really it, to understand if what I'm saying is true. Really look into it, but I wouldn't look into it by going to the mainstream media, actually. But do your research. World Peace Diet actually goes into this with a lot of references. Right now, from now on, we'll be seeing some here on the screen, some paintings by my wonderful spouse Madeline from Switzerland. And I'll just say a few more things here. Really want to focus for a couple of more minutes on physical health, because that's something that we're all interested in. I think it's important. And like I said earlier, the good news is that our physical health, of course, is embedded within the health of our environment, the health of our relationships, how really just everything we do. Breathing is important, really to learn to breathe in a full, deep, relaxed way. Getting exercise is important, getting sunshine is important, cultivating healthy, positive relationships, being loving to the people in our lives as much as we can. The more we are living this way, the healthier we'll be. I think we all know this at a deep level. We're not taught this really by the government. We're not taught this in school, but this is something we can learn about. But as far as food goes, one of the things that's essential to understand, like I said earlier, is that animal-based foods concentrate toxins. And this is something that I cannot overestimate. There's 3 different types of toxins that animal foods concentrate in their flesh or in dairy products. And the irony is that a lot of people will say, well, I'm moving toward a healthier diet. I'm getting away from red meat, say. I have to say, in terms of just health, the things that people usually move toward are not healthier, typically. In other words, most people will say, well, I gave up red meat, now I'm just eating some fish, some dairy products, and some eggs. Well, I have to say, quite honestly, from my research, and the research of many other people who have looked into this, that of all the animal-based foods, fish, dairy products, and eggs are probably the most unhealthy you can possibly eat. The reason is toxins. All animals concentrate toxins in their flesh, like I said earlier. So the pesticide and herbicide residues and heavy metals and all that stuff ends up in the water, it ends up in the food. So we're getting that if we're eating animal-based foods. And dairy products, remember, all toxins concentrate in the fatty tissues, mainly. Like if we eat toxins, our body will try to store it away. It'll try to get rid of it, but if it can't get rid of it, it'll store it away in the fatty tissues in our body. That's why very often if we go on a healthy diet and we start eating healthy, fruits and vegetables are blood cleansers, and they start cleaning our body. And very often we'll start to feel sick. And that's good. Because what that is all those toxins that have been kind of squirreled away in the fatty tissues of our body, our body starts cleaning house, and they go into our bloodstream, and they start going, and we may start getting headaches, and we may start getting a runny nose and coughing. All this phlegm is coming up. We're cleansing. It's good. So but if we go to a doctor, see, that's why I stayed away from doctors. If I go to a doctor and say, oh gosh, I have this sore throat and runny nose, and I say, and I started a vegan diet, they'll probably say, oh, a vegan diet, no wonder you're getting sick. Go back, eat some meat and dairy, don't do that. And so doctors are not taught nutrition, really, and that's just a fact. They don't get any nutritional training. So I always say to Madeline, if I'd be smarter going to a car mechanic for nutritional advice probably than going to a doctor, because they really don't know what the heck they're talking about for the most part. There are some good exceptions, of course, but for the most part they don't get nutritional advice, training, and neither do most nurses either. So we really are on our own. And the thing to understand is that eating animal-based foods causes these toxins to concentrate. When we eat plant-based foods, we'll cleanse, so we may feel sick as we're cleansing, but if we get through that, and some people don't, some people just can cleanse and not feel sick, but we'll just start getting more and more energy, and this is something I've heard, like Madeline and I have traveled all over the world. We've given lectures in all 50 states and over 50 countries around the world, and when we ask people who have gone vegan if there's anything they regret about it, we always get the same answer, which is, yes, I regret that I didn't go vegan earlier in my life. That's all what I always hear, because once, like my mother, even my mother and Madeline's mother, I mean, they didn't go vegan until they were in their 70s, but it was so great that they did, because my mother had really serious asthma. She had a hard time breathing. Her whole life she had that. It's from dairy products. They create a lot of phlegm, right? They create a lot of mucus and a lot of congestion in many people. And Madeline's mother had arthritis. That's from dairy products, again, and meat. And all these toxins concentrate in the joints. The doctors make a lot of money on all this, right? The pharmaceutical industry makes a lot of money. They're paying for the media. You're never going to hear about it. That's how they make their money. But they went vegan in their 70s, and they both lived into their mid to late 90s, and much healthier than they had been earlier. So it's never too late. That's the moral of the story. The earlier the better, but it's never too late. But animal foods concentrate the environmental toxins, but they also are given many different toxins. There's over 10,000 different drugs and hormones that have been approved by the USDA to be used in animal agriculture. So these animals are getting antibiotics to make them gain weight. 90%, actually it's up to 95% of all antibiotics used in the United States, it's not used by people, they're injected into animals against their will. Just inject them to keep them alive, and so we're getting huge antibiotic residues. There's growth hormones, there's all kinds of toxic chemicals and hormones that are injected into these animals, and so we're eating that stuff. We're eating the drug residues of over 10,000 different drugs when we eat these foods. And then there's also the naturally occurring toxins. So even if these foods are organic and just grown in little backyard farms or something, there's naturally occurring toxins. For example, milk, this is one of the problems with milk, cow's milk. The main protein in cow's milk is called casein. Casein is a very large, unwieldy molecule that we human beings cannot deal with well. We don't have an enzyme, which little calves do have, called renin. Renin breaks down casein. And we kill calves and take the renin, that's rennet, out of their stomachs and use it to coagulate milk to make cheese. But we don't have renin. So Billy, if you just want to improve your health dramatically, cut out dairy products. You will see a dramatic improvement in your health, because casein really it's very high in cheese, but also in milk and other dairy products, except butter. Butter is just a fat. But so just understand that there's naturally occurring toxins. There's IGF-1 growth hormone, for example. Like these little calves put on 1,000 pounds in a year, right? But if we eat dairy products, we're getting IGF-1 growth hormone. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire for little cancers, right? So breast cancer and prostate cancer are driven by dairy products. Eggs are very similar. Eggs have a huge amount of cholesterol and saturated fat and a lot of hormones in them as well that are not healthy, and drug residues. So if we get away from dairy and eggs, which are very unhealthy and have inherent things in them that are hard for us to deal with, that contribute to liver disease and kidney disease and heart disease and strokes and cancer and diabetes. I mean, dairy drives diabetes, really. And then the other thing is fish, like I said, because all the toxins end up in fish. So staying away from those, and then while you're at it, give up the rest. That's what I would say. Because ultimately, our physical body is a reflection of the foods that we're eating. And all of the nutrients that we need to be healthy, we can get from plant-based foods. So these toxins are in those foods. There's also the third type of toxin I'll just mention, which is what I call metaphysical toxins. So these animals, I know you probably don't want to hear about it, but these animals live extremely painful, fearful lives. They're born into slavery, they're routinely mutilated, they're hyper-confined, and so we're eating fear and terror and pain and despair as well. And is that really what I want to build this body temple with, actually? So the idea is to just understand that that's inherent. These animals are terrified as they're being killed, or as they're being milked also. They're very unhappy. All of us have been given this gift, and it's a wonderful gift to just let animals live their lives, try to let hungry people live their lives, indigenous people, wildlife. The whole interconnected web of life really depends on our choices. Each one of us as an individual, we think, well, I'm just one person, it doesn't really matter. But one person can make a big difference. And each one of us can be a radiating center of health and kindness and love and caring. And we can talk to our friends and neighbors. We don't have to blame anyone. Just understand we're all born into a society. We're just doing what we've been told. And is it always a good idea to just do what you've been told? Is that really a good idea? So that's the key, is to just, like what I say is that I'm so glad that I discovered that the only reason I was eating animal foods all those years that I did was because I was just following orders. Now I'm not doing it anymore, and it's fantastic. It really is. I mean, I would say the smartest thing I ever did besides marrying my wonderful spouse, Madeline, was to go vegan, because it really creates a foundation for health and peace. And so many people I've talked to say it was like a heavy weight went off their shoulders. The biggest obstacle really is not the food, it's other people. Like, what are my friends going to say? What's my family going to say? Food is very much how we relate with each other and how we socialize and so forth. So if we eat different food, it's kind of like you're from another tribe. We're not from this. So we're very afraid of not getting along with our tribe. But the good news is that it is changing. More and more people are realizing that it's important to be healthy, and we can create tribes of health. And who knows, maybe Hickory, North Carolina will become one of the bright lights in the United States of healthy living. It can happen. It's happening more and more in many different cities. People are waking up and realizing that cancer and heart disease and diabetes are a big price to pay, and that we don't have to do that. We can be healthy and energetic and run around and live long, happy, healthy lives, and just based on the scriptural truth that the golden rule essentially tells us that whatever we want for ourselves, to give that to others. If we want to be loved, just be loving to others. Whatever we sow, we'll reap. Whatever we put out comes back. And the golden rule includes everyone, hungry people, slaughterhouse workers, future generations, animals, wildlife, indigenous people. We can bless everyone. We can let our life be a blessing. And the more we do that, the more prosperous and abundant all of us will be. So much love to all of you. Thanks again for your kind attention, and may we all go forth and multiply this message. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, so I can see we've gone pretty much to the time limit here. What do you think, Christoph? Do we have time for one or two questions? So if you're phasing out of a traditional diet and you're moving over to a plant-based diet, what's the benefit of organic? I mean, organic is always better, for sure. I mean, I think, there are people who cheat, some farmers who say it's organic and it's not, or maybe the system isn't perfect, but by and large, if we purchase organically grown food, I mean, the best thing is if we can grow it ourselves, right? Madeline and I have our own garden, food forest, actually. We have like 70 fruit and nut trees where we live, and we grow a lot of our own food. And we also support local farmers where we live. We live in Northern California, so there's local farmers, we support them. So that's the best thing, is to eat plant-based foods. Organic meat, dairy products, and eggs, I'm sure are better than non-organic meat, dairy products, and eggs. However, like I said, there's inherent toxins in meat, dairy products, and eggs. The vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, and seeds are essentially very benevolent, right? They give us the nutrients that we need to be healthy. They don't have any cholesterol or saturated fat. They don't have animal protein. See, the problem with eggs, for example, in general, or dairy products or meat, is that the proteins are made by these animals. So they eat plants. Plants have amino acids, right? There's 20 amino acids, and our bodies make over 1 million different proteins. It's like making words out of an alphabet, right? They put them together for whatever we need. Our bodies need all kinds of proteins to do all kinds of things. Same thing with cows and pigs and chickens. They eat plants, and then they make proteins. If I eat the plant, I get the simple amino acids, then my body can make whatever I need. So plant-based protein is much higher quality than animal-based protein. Animal-based protein is toxic because the animal has made these large, gigantic molecules, like casein is got a molecular weight of 233,000. It's a huge molecule. Same thing with egg yolks, and they have these gigantic protein molecules. So our body, we eat that, our body goes, all right, now what do I do? We've got to break that down, that big gigantic protein molecule, into amino acids so we can make the proteins that we need. And that creates acid. There's so much nitrogen and sulfur that there's a lot of acid. And the acid, it's filling up the hospitals, right? The acidification and inflammation is caused by these foods, and that causes all these diseases, cancer, for example, and diabetes and the other things, and osteoporosis, all these diseases that we see filling up the hospitals. So that's why, sure, it's better to eat organic eggs than eggs, but it'd be much better to leave the eggs out, right? I mean, you're getting this toxic protein, even if they're organic, and eat plant-based proteins. All the research agrees on this. The oldest, longest-lived cultures and people in the world eat, this is what they eat. They eat a low-protein, high complex carbohydrate diet, right? Complex carbohydrates are vegetables and fruits and grains and beans. This is the foundation for health. And carbohydrates burn clean. They burn to just carbon dioxide and water. That's it. You just breathe out carbon dioxide and water. That's it. They burn, they're clean burning fuel. So you need some protein to build tissues and so forth, but you always have acid with protein. So really, this whole protein thing, it's good not to overdo that, actually. The organic is a beautiful idea. It's just simply working in harmony with nature and trying to build the soil, right? Like where we have an organic, we have actually a veganic, it's called veganic or stock-free agriculture. So we don't use any bone meal or blood meal or manure in our garden. So it's all, we build up the soil using plant-based compost and compost tea, wood chips and crop covers and so forth. So that's, I think, the best, right? If we just don't use animals for any of it, we can and actually research has shown that that's more efficient. You can actually grow more food without any animal inputs. You don't need manure or bone meal or blood meal or fish meal or feather meal or whatever. But we're used to that in our society because we have so much of it. We have so much manure hanging around. We don't know what to do with it from all this animal. The USDA Organic label it's a good thing. I mean, there are some people who cheat, I guess. You hear about it now and then. But all in all, it's a rigorous program. I just wish that that farmers didn't have to pay a lot of money, because that's the problem. So organic food is more expensive because they have to go through this whole process of proving that their food is organic. Well, people can spray pesticides and make it really unhealthy, and they don't have to pay anything, so it's much cheaper. So everybody buys that. For me, like, even though organic is more expensive, to me it's like health insurance in a way. I pay more money, but since I never had to pay health insurance, I got plenty of money. So it's all that money I saved on health insurance, I can just buy organic. And it's also, I think it's like a donation, because farmers are doing the best they can to build the soil and not use chemical fertilizers and pesticide and herbicides to try to minimize that. So there are standards that are in place. But to do it really well, it's best to get to know your farmer if you can and do it yourself. If you can grow food yourself, if you have a little bit of land, that's a great way. And then you can recycle your compost, you can reconnect with the earth around you. I really think that the more we can have victory gardens. Remember victory gardens after World War II? We need that again. I think if everybody had a garden and taught our kids the beauty of gardening, we would have more respect for farmers and more respect for quality food, and we'd be a lot healthier. I think it would really be a positive thing to do. We're happy to answer questions. We have our book, The World Peace Diet. We have a mailing list if you're interested. You can go to our website, which is just worldpeacediet.com, and learn more there. There's videos. Madeline has cooking videos, lots of different ways of preparing food. We have gardening videos if you want to learn about gardening and cooking, and we have music videos and lectures and interviews and all that kind of stuff. So we're happy to work with you. If you have questions, you can go to our website and send me an email. No problem, I'll answer you. We're here really to just do the best we can to try to help all of us understand these things, because the most important thing is to have a healthy world for our future generations, for our children. And I think that the way to do that is through understanding our interconnectedness with the environment, with the animals, and eat healthy food so that we have energy and we're not sick. Okay, so thank you everyone. We really appreciate it.